What if everything you've ever learned about God, faith, and reality was deliberately shaped so you would never find the truth on your own? Yes, it's shocking. But it's not fiction. There is a secret code hidden between the Psalms of the Bible and the principles of the Kybalion. A code that the Church has spent centuries reorganizing, distorting, and, in some cases, locking away in the vaults of the Vatican. And the most unsettling part, you repeat these codes every day without even knowing it. In gestures, in words, in thoughts that aren't yours, but were programmed to feel natural. The problem is, most people live as if this is normal. As if kneeling instinctively before a symbol meant connection with the divine. As if blindly accepting a doctrine was the same as having faith. But what if the truth is exactly the opposite? This video is not a provocation. It's an invitation. Here, you'll discover how Egyptian Hermeticism and early Christianity were silently woven together. How the Vatican hides within its churches the same codes that the Kybalion reveals through words. And how you can finally access what has been kept secret for generations, and use this knowledge to break cycles, awaken your mind, and shift the frequency of your own reality. From this moment on, nothing will ever be the same. Have you ever felt like the world they showed you isn't quite the world you actually live in? As if there's something behind the curtain, a well-rehearsed stage where every gesture, symbol, and piece of news carries a hidden purpose. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's perception engineering. The Kybalion already stated, all is mind. And when we understand this, we begin to see that what we call reality may actually be a carefully installed mental program, reinforced by symbols, rituals, and repetition. It's like watching a movie without realizing you're inside it. Most people wake up, work, consume, and sleep without ever questioning who designed that cycle. The hidden reality is more than a spiritual metaphor, it's a vibrational code that operates on the level of the collective subconscious. What you believe to be the real world may simply be the reflection of what you've been conditioned to perceive. This is where mind manipulation comes into full force. Through images, religious dogmas, and invisible power structures, an energetic feedback loop is created. And whoever controls the energy, controls the narrative. This programming goes far beyond TV or social media, it's embedded in the words we speak, in daily rituals, and even in the architecture of our cities. Have you ever noticed how many religious buildings follow a nearly hypnotic geometric pattern? That's no coincidence. That's esoteric symbolism in action. Every angle, every stained glass window, every sacred hymn carries a vibrational frequency. And those frequencies shape what we feel, think, and even what we believe is possible. A clear example lies in religious rites we repeat without knowing why. Kneeling, reciting specific words, gazing upward in reverence, all of this activates archetypes rooted deep in our psyche. This is what we call ceremonial magic disguised as faith. And this is where spiritual control enters, the use of the sacred as a tool for vibrational domination. As uncomfortable as that may sound, the Catholic Church has mastered this form of engineering like few others. But let's be clear, this doesn't mean spirituality is false. Quite the opposite. It means that if you understand the codes operating behind the curtains, you can stop being a puppet, and start becoming a co-creator. The secret is to get out of autopilot and start seeing reality with new eyes. Like when you watch a magic trick and suddenly spot the thread that moved the card. The veil doesn't disappear, but you begin to see through it. And this is exactly why the Kybalion becomes dangerous to those who control the game. Because it teaches something few dare to say, that everything you call the physical world is, in fact, a projection of the mind. If all is mind, as the first of the 7 Hermetic Principles states, then everything can be reprogrammed. But, why was this book nearly erased from official history? And who are the real authors behind its teachings? Few books stir as much discomfort behind the curtains of power as the Kybalion. Enigmatic, timeless, and surprisingly relevant, this small treatise on Hermetic wisdom doesn't seem written to teach, but to remind. And perhaps that's why it's so dangerous. Those who read the Kybalion with attention feel something pulsing between the lines, a subtle, almost vibrational language that speaks directly to the unconscious. And it's precisely for that reason you never saw it on your school bookshelf or heard it mentioned during Sunday Mass. Written under the pseudonym, The Three Initiates, the Kybalion was published in 1908, but its roots dive deep into Egyptian Hermeticism. Many scholars associate its teachings with the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, a figure who merges the Egyptian god Thoth with the Greek god Hermes. We're not talking about mythology here, but about spiritual technology encoded in words. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, was also the master of the creative word. And the Kybalion is a compendium of vibration, mind, polarity, and the alchemy of consciousness. But why, then, was such a small book so thoroughly silenced? Because it offers power without intermediaries. It requires no priests, churches, temples, or dogmas. It hands the keys directly to the reader. It teaches, for instance, that you can transmute sorrow into wisdom, fear into courage, and chaos into clarity, all through the mind. That breaks the traditional model of spiritual control, where the faithful depend on external figures for salvation. It's no coincidence that the same Hermetic principles appear, diluted, across various religions, including early Christianity. The difference is that, in dogmatic versions, these principles were distorted, personified, or buried beneath layers of moralism. The Church absorbed Hermetic symbolic language, but cloaked it in guilt, punishment, and fear. The Kybalion, in contrast, speaks of self-mastery, of vibration, of consciousness as the cause. It is a book that liberates, not one that imprisons. And if you want a practical example, consider the principle of polarity. The Kybalion teaches that everything is dual, hot and cold are the same thing in different degrees. Now think about that in terms of your emotional life. Anxiety and excitement are just different frequencies of the same axis. This means that, with mental practice, you can slide the scale emotionally, changing the quality of your inner experience. That is mental alchemy. That is hidden power. And perhaps that's exactly why, even today, the Kybalion remains left out of the secret archives of official history. It's not just a book, it's a threat to the monopoly on the sacred. But what's most intriguing is what begins to unfold when we cross-reference its pages with the symbols, doctrines, and rituals of the Vatican. Because that's when the veil truly begins to tear. For centuries, the Catholic Church was far more than a temple of faith. It was also a laboratory of symbolism, a center of both spiritual and political power, and a guardian of esoteric codes that never reached the common people. What few realize is that behind the altars and sermons, a true alchemy of ancient knowledge was being practiced. Many of the teachings of Egyptian Hermeticism, contained in the Kybalion, were quietly absorbed. But instead of teaching them, the Church reinterpreted, disguised, and locked them away beneath the mantle of institutionalized faith. The method was clear: assimilate millennia-old knowledge and reframe it under the light of a new doctrine. This wasn't done out of ignorance, it was a strategy. The power of religion as control lay in its ability to keep the masses spiritual, yet obedient. Thus, the Hermetic principles were encoded into rituals, but without a manual. Baptism, confession, the transubstantiation of bread and wine, are all echoes of much older secret rituals, now dressed in Christian liturgy. A clear example is the use of holy water, a symbol of vibrational purification used for thousands of years, rooted in pagan and alchemical traditions. The Kybalion teaches that reality is shaped by the mind, but the Church, instead of encouraging self-knowledge, reinforced the idea of sin and external redemption. This subtle redirection is the heart of invisible manipulation. The individual stops seeking within and begins seeking salvation outside, in saints, in priests, in dogmas. It's the gradual disconnection from the inner creative mind. What was once esoteric initiation became moral catechism. And with that, the hidden reality was pushed beneath the altar. Even cathedral architecture tells a story. Every column, every arch, every stained glass window is a symbolic condenser. It's not just about beauty, it's sacred language. And this language activates deep layers of the collective subconscious. Walking through a basilica is, for the soul, like moving through a vibrational labyrinth. You leave different from how you entered. But this power was not used to awaken, it was used to program. A true engineering of perception built upon the sacred. And if you think this is all in the past, consider that the Vatican still holds closed-door rites, Latin ceremonies, and codes that only the initiated understand. The forbidden truth isn't merely hidden, it's out in the open, encoded in symbols, rhythms, and words that few can decipher. And this leads us to a deeply unsettling question: to what extent have the Hermetic Principles been distorted to fit into religious dogma? Perhaps understanding these distortions is the necessary step to unlocking the most closely guarded secrets of Western spirituality. Because behind the incense and liturgy echoes something much older. Something that has pulsed since ancient Egypt, and can still be reclaimed. Imagine placing side by side two seemingly distinct systems. On one side, the 7 principles of the Kybalion, on the other, the religious dogmas of the Catholic Church. At first glance, they appear to be opposites. But upon deeper observation, something intriguing emerges: points of convergence, and zones of distortion. For instance, the Hermetic principle, all is mind, asserts that all reality is mental, created by consciousness. Meanwhile, the Catholic dogma claims that reality was created by God, but that God is external, separate from the believer. See the subtlety? One invites co-creation, the other demands submission. The principle of correspondence, as above, so below, directly echoes biblical phrases like, on earth as it is in heaven. But while Hermeticism invites exploration of both the inner and outer worlds as reflections of each other, traditional religious doctrine reduces this correspondence to a purely moral or symbolic realm. What was meant to be a bridge between the microcosm and the macrocosm has become a decorative metaphor. Consciousness alchemy was reduced to empty prayer. Another clear example is the principle of vibration. The Kybalion teaches that everything vibrates, that nothing is truly at rest, and that our personal vibration shapes our reality. In traditional religion, this concept is echoed in chants, psalms, and prayers, but without the explanation that the frequency of a word can literally shape matter. Sacred sound became an automatic ritual. The true power of the word was hidden beneath the veil of repetition. Thus, the spiritual technology embedded in the Psalms was lost to those who don't know how to vibrate consciously. When we examine the principle of rhythm, we find that the Church uses it, but silently. Sacred dates follow lunar, seasonal, and astrological patterns. Easter, Christmas, Pentecost, all strategically positioned according to ancient calendars the Church claims not to follow. Here we clearly see the use of hidden wisdom clothed in dogmatic garments. It's as if the Church says, don't believe in astrology, while secretly acting in complete alignment with it. The principle of cause and effect teaches that everything that happens is the result of a preceding cause. In Hermeticism, this is liberating, because it shows we are creators of our own destiny. In Catholic dogma, however, this concept is frozen into the idea of God's will. Instead of awakening personal responsibility, resignation is reinforced. One does not change their reality, they accept suffering as divine trial. This is the programming of reality operating silently, preventing the awakening of the creative mind. Perhaps the most emblematic of all is the principle of gender. In Hermeticism, it represents sacred duality, the masculine and feminine as universal creative forces. In religious dogma, this duality is polarized: the masculine becomes divine, the feminine becomes submissive. Creative energy is labeled as sin. The goddess becomes either a saint or a sinner. And the original balance is shattered. But what would happen if the 7 principles were once again taught in their original form? If the symbolic language were unlocked? That's where the secret of vibration and the power of the word begins to emerge with renewed force. There is an ancient mystery that transcends cultures, religions, and centuries: the power of the word. Not just as a means of communication, but as a tool of vibrational creation. The Kybalion teaches that everything vibrates, and that vibration is the foundation of reality. The Bible says, "In the beginning was the Word." The Vedas speak of Om as the primordial sound. The Kabbalah teaches that the universe was created through letters. It's all there, in different layers, saying the same thing: the Word creates. And if it creates, then it can also heal, transform, and transmute. But, why has no one ever taught you this in a practical way? The answer lies in how this knowledge was divided. One part was reserved for the initiated, and the other was offered to the masses, without a manual. While priests studied sacred sounds in Latin, the faithful memorized prayers without understanding what they were saying. The Psalms, for instance, are vibrational formulas disguised in poetic language. Reading them consciously changes your energetic field. Repeating them mechanically moves nothing. This is spiritual technology, a science of vibration embedded in devotion, camouflaged within sacred rituals. Many liturgical chants still follow ancient harmonic patterns capable of altering states of consciousness. Gregorian chants, for example, are tuned to frequencies that resonate with the heart and brain fields. This isn't just faith, it's vibrational physics. But instead of teaching this to the faithful, the system chose to keep the mystery wrapped in reverence. Sound became ceremony. The voice became obedience. The word stopped being creative, and became domesticated. And here's what's most fascinating: this principle can be applied in daily life. When you speak in anger, you emit a vibrational wave that affects your field and the field of others. When you declare something with conviction, like, "I am capable," you restructure your vibrational identity. Try starting your day with simple affirmations like, "My mind is creative, I command the reality I vibrate, my inner sound is my temple." Repeat them for 21 days. This isn't cheap mysticism, it's energetic coherence in action. Curiously, the Vatican holds documents on the influence of tones on the human mind. There are reports of ancient texts, locked in the secret archives, that speak of the sounds used in early Christian ceremonies, sounds derived from Egyptian Hermeticism. The practice of singing the sacred didn't originate in Christianity. It comes from the temples of Isis, the mystery schools of Alexandria, the Magi of Chaldea. But all of this was quietly renamed, restructured, and locked away behind closed doors. And perhaps this is the turning point. Because once you understand that the word is vibration, and vibration is reality, you never speak casually again. And you begin to see with new eyes all that has been censored, erased, or sealed away in rooms the Vatican never opened. So the question remains, what still lies hidden in those archives, waiting to be rediscovered? There is a place in the world where knowledge is sealed beneath layers of secrecy, surveillance, and denial. It's not some mystical cave or a lost temple in the desert. It's at the very heart of the Vatican, its secret archives. Officially, it's merely a historical center for document preservation. But for those who understand the backstage of spiritual power, these archives are far more than records, they are vibrational vaults concealing a forbidden truth. And the most curious part? What's locked away there isn't heresy, it's power. Within those walls lie texts that would completely transform the traditional understanding of faith. Apocryphal Gospels revealing a more mystical Jesus, one fully aware of his role as a co-creator of reality. Manuscripts on Hermeticism, the alchemy of consciousness, and the secret teachings of esoteric initiations long silenced throughout the centuries. Entire books about the creative mind, energetic manipulation, and the true power of the word were excluded from the Bible. Not due to lack of faith, but due to an excess of vibrational control. The Church knew, and still knows, that those who control knowledge also shape the collective energetic field. The collective subconscious is influenced not only by images, but by narratives. And to control sacred narratives is to program the reality of the masses. That's why so many texts were censored, burned, or buried. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, of Thomas, of Judas, all excluded. Not because they contradicted faith, but because they activated too much of the collective consciousness. They spoke of inner power, of unity with the divine, of vibration and the word as tools for transformation. There's a curious account from a French cardinal in the 19th century, who allegedly read a Hermetic text hidden in the Vatican catacombs. He claimed the content was so profound that it could awaken multitudes and dismantle centuries of collective illusion. This kind of content is kept from the public for a simple reason. If everyone knew they carried within themselves the same codes as the initiated masters, no religious authority could remain standing. Invisible power would lose its grip, and hidden reality would become common knowledge. But all is not lost. In recent years, fragments of these texts have begun to surface. Independent researchers, Hermetic scholars, and spiritual seekers have started uncovering copies in ancient monasteries, Eastern libraries, and Egyptian manuscripts. It's as if the energy of the earth itself is now releasing what has been held back for so long. And each recovered passage seems to echo the Hermetic principles. All is mind. All is vibration. All is access, for those who know how to seek. And perhaps the most striking connection is yet to come. Because if the 7 Hermetic principles were hidden, why do so many apocalyptic symbols also appear within the sacred halls of the Vatican? What connects the Kybalion and the Book of Revelation? What mysteries lie behind the so-called 7 seals? Few biblical texts carry an aura as enigmatic as the Book of Revelation. Within it lies one of the most symbolic mysteries in all of Christian tradition, the 7 seals. Now stop and consider: 7 seals, 7 Hermetic principles. Coincidence? Maybe. But for those who understand the language of symbols and delve into Egyptian Hermeticism, nothing is accidental. The seals of Revelation aren't merely prophetic events, they're vibrational archetypes, layers of the human mind that, once opened, reveal true spiritual power. In a way, they represent the steps of esoteric initiation. The Kybalion, in describing the 7 Hermetic principles, mind, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender, offers an internal map of awakening. When we cross-reference these principles with the 7 seals of Revelation, we begin to see that both serve as symbolic keys to expanding collective consciousness. Each seal, when broken, unleashes spiritual energy, shatters layers of collective illusion, and marks a new stage in understanding programmed reality. Have you ever considered that the apocalypse might be a process of internal revelation, not external destruction? Some independent scholars have suggested this connection for decades. Joseph Campbell, for example, while analyzing religious myths, said that the true apocalypse is the mind awakening to what has always been hidden. The breaking of the seals, then, becomes the progressive activation of the Hermetic principles within the human being. The symbolic destruction of outdated perception. The replacement of fear with conscious dominion over reality. And in this light, the Kybalion is no longer an isolated esoteric book, it becomes a cipher to decode the hidden messages of the Bible itself. The first seal speaks of a rider on a white horse, a classic symbol of initiation, of mental illumination. All is mind. The second brings red, the color of polarity, of the conflict between opposites. Polarity and rhythm begin to act. The third introduces the scales, a direct symbol of cause and effect. And so it continues. The symbols begin to connect, like pieces of a vibrational puzzle. What once seemed chaotic now begins to reveal a deeper logic, the logic of the alchemy of consciousness. For those who read with initiatic eyes, Revelation is a manual of spiritual transmutation, the very same transformation that the Kybalion proposes, only written in symbolic language cloaked in images of war, beasts, and cataclysms. This is no accident. It is esoteric symbolism serving a dual function, to protect sacred knowledge and to confuse the uninitiated. The Vatican understands this language, which is why its walls are adorned with depictions of Revelation. Not as warnings of destruction, but as signs of hidden dominion over the cycles of the collective mind. And if the seals are indeed linked to the Hermetic principles, what happens when they are all activated within a single person? What happens when the symbolic meets the vibrational, and the mind begins to decode the hidden codes shaping its own reality? Perhaps the answer lies in the images that surround us, in the structures we call sacred, and in the symbols we overlook every single day. Messages are being transmitted constantly, not through speech, but through shapes, colors, and structures. And the most unsettling part? You absorb it all, even without realizing it. Symbolism operates as a silent language that bypasses the rational mind and goes straight to the subconscious. The Vatican, a master of hiding truths in plain sight, is also one of the greatest engineers of this language. Every architectural detail, every symbol carved into stone or painted on cathedral ceilings, has an energetic function. Nothing is accidental, it's all part of a carefully embedded vibrational code. You walk into a cathedral and feel something deep, almost unexplainable. It's not just spirituality, it's the activation of a field. The geometry, the stained glass windows, the towering vaults, everything is designed to affect the psyche. It's like stepping into a portal calibrated to align your vibration with a specific frequency. This goes beyond faith, it's spiritual control through sacred architecture. And by repeating this experience every Sunday for years, the mind begins to mold itself without ever questioning. A ritual disguised as devotion. This symbolic manipulation extends far beyond religious walls. It flows into art, politics, fashion, and media. Look closely at the logos of major corporations, the designs on currency, the symbols used in global events. The all-seeing eye, the serpent, the hexagram, the labyrinth. All of them trace back to occult traditions, many rooted in Egyptian Hermeticism or the esoteric tradition. These symbols aren't used for aesthetics. They're used strategically. They operate on the level of hidden frequency, influencing emotions, desires, and mental states. And here's the curious paradox: the less you believe in these effects, the more vulnerable you become. Because a symbol doesn't need belief, it only needs presence. It functions as a code that, once repeatedly exposed to your attention, begins shaping your perception. That's the secret of esoteric symbolism. It implants ideas without words and generates emotions without context. A true bypass of critical consciousness. And the elite knows this. That's why they control aesthetics, culture, and even the heroes you're taught to admire. Want to try a simple exercise? Take old religious images, cover the eyes of the figures, mask the faces, and observe only the gestures and forms. What's left? Triangles, spirals, crosses, moons, flames, eyes, portals. It's an ancient vocabulary speaking to your modern mind. Go further, and look at the layout of certain temples from above. Many form keys, mandalas, or even Hebrew letters. The map is in plain sight, but only those who know the codes can decipher it. And if everything around you might be carrying hidden messages, what kind of reality is that helping to sustain? Who wrote this symbolic script? And more importantly, if you begin to change your perception of these symbols, could you also begin to change the way your own mind operates? The world we live in appears solid, concrete, objective. But what if all of this is just the surface of something far more malleable and manipulable? The truth that few dare to confront is that reality, as most people know it, is a vibrational construct, a sophisticated program of the collective mind, designed to appear unquestionable. And whoever controls this program, also controls the desires, destinies, and emotions of billions. The question that arises is both simple and unsettling: who is behind this invisible control? The Kybalion warned us, all is mind. This means the external world is a reflection of an internal process, not only individual, but collective. What we feel, think, and believe, when repeated en masse, solidifies into what we call consensual reality. This is collective consciousness in motion. But when that consciousness is manipulated, programmed through symbols, dogmas, and specific vibrations, the result is a programmed reality. And whoever understands this dynamic can either awaken others, or dominate them. Major religious centers, mass media, financial institutions, all function as frequency emitters. They steer your attention, guide your emotions, shape your mental patterns. It's a magnetic field of spiritual and emotional control operating in silence, maintained by invisible rituals and deeply rooted beliefs. The Catholic Church, with its centuries of symbolic and ritualistic dominance, has been one of the great architects of this engineering. And it didn't act alone. Secret societies, initiated elites, and occult circles collaborated to script what we call reality. But all is not lost. Understanding how reality is molded is the first step toward reclaiming your power. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you try to change certain life patterns, something seems to pull you back? It's because you're trying to change the software without altering the source code. That code resides in the collective subconscious, and it can only be rewritten with vibrational awareness. And that doesn't happen through wishful thinking, but through practice, meditation, conscious writing, detox from toxic information, intentional use of language. All of this reprograms your frequency. If reality is malleable, then it can also be hacked. But to do that, you must step out of distraction and into intention. Every time you accept a belief without questioning, you feed the system. Every time you repeat a ritual unconsciously, you reinforce the code. Awakening begins the moment you observe. Observation alone cracks open the matrix. And when you start to question, not out of rebellion, but out of wisdom, the structures begin to shake. Now think, if this entire program was built to limit your perception, what happens when you begin to apply the 7 Hermetic Principles with clarity? What changes when you stop being the reflection, and become the cause? That's where the true inner revolution begins, and perhaps, the greatest awakening of all is closer than you think. There comes a moment when the search is no longer driven by curiosity, it becomes urgent. When you realize that the world around you feels repetitive, suffocating, predictable, it's not because reality is that way by nature, but because you're trapped inside a mental script you didn't write. The Kybalion doesn't appear as just another philosophy, it emerges as a key. A form of spiritual technology that, when deeply understood, has the power to reprogram what you feel, think, and live. And more than that, it reminds you of something the programmed reality tried to make you forget: you are the cause, not the effect. The 7 Hermetic Principles are not just poetic metaphors. They are operational tools for rewriting your life. Want proof? By understanding that all is mind, you begin to realize your beliefs are lines of code. And changing your beliefs is changing your reality. When you grasp the law of vibration, you see that what you feel, not what you pretend, is what shapes the events around you. Reciting mantras in anger or making affirmations in fear won't work. Coherence between emotion and intention is the hidden key to unlocking real results. But how do you apply this in practice? Start small, but start consciously. Upon waking, take a deep breath and choose the first vibration of your day. Before sleeping, mentally review what you vibrated and what thoughts you fed. Read the Psalms not as prayers, but as frequency codes. Use your voice with intention. Every word is a wave that impacts something or someone. And remember, thinking is emitting. Feeling is programming. Acting is crystallizing. This is the triad of consciousness alchemy. You can also transform your vibrational environment. Avoid content that operates on the frequency of fear and scarcity. Choose symbols that uplift, keep images that represent expansion, read books that provoke reflection, listen to music that elevates your field. Spend time in places where energy pulses with life. Your energetic field is like a garden: what you plant, grows. And the greatest spiritual sabotage is living without tending to your inner soil. The Hermetic awakening isn't a one-time event. It's a process. A daily deprogramming of installed illusions, a constant practice of remembering who you are beneath the masks. And the deeper you go, the more you realize that everything once labeled mystical, occult, or forbidden, was simply the soul's manual, hidden in plain sight. The Kybalion is that manual. And you don't need permission to use it, only presence and courage. And if all of this is true, what else is being hidden behind sacred language, repeated symbols, and prepackaged truths? Perhaps, in bridging faith, science, and consciousness, what emerges is something greater than answers. Perhaps what rises to the surface is your deepest memory. The one no one could ever take. Only lulled to sleep. You didn't arrive here by accident. Out of millions of videos, distractions, and voices, something, maybe subtle, maybe unexplainable, brought you precisely to this moment. And that alone speaks volumes. Because very few access this kind of knowledge. Even fewer are able to absorb it. And almost no one has the courage to truly feel the impact of what was just revealed. But you stayed. You listened. And somehow, something within you recognized it. It might seem like just another video on a screen. But if you knew how to read between the lines, you realize that what was unlocked here is not ordinary. You won't find it in best-selling books, or in Sunday sermons. This is ancient language. Vibrational memory awakening parts of you that have been asleep for a long, long time. You're no longer where you began. And even if you don't yet know how, something inside you has already started to shift. Now comes the most important part, protecting this new frequency. Don't let it dissolve in the noise of everyday life. Because the collective mind will try to pull you back. It will whisper, it was just a video. It will invite you to forget. And that's when you decide. Will you step back, or will you hold the field? If the second path calls to you, if you feel that your expansion began here, then stay with us. Because what's coming next is even more revealing. More daring. More transformative. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. And get ready. What you've seen so far was only the beginning.